So you're a small business owner. You've been dealing with the Paycheck Protection Program, trying to figure out what's the best way to get money in the door, keep your people employed, keep everybody working, and go through this whole process to keep your business alive. And finally, last week, they started to announce the actual worksheet for loan forgiveness. So now you're watching these different webinars, trying to figure out what is an FTE, what does that mean, what's an incurred cost versus paid cost, alternate pay period versus the covered pay period. Well, during this specific video, we're going to cover the FTE calculations, full-time equivalent calculation. So if you're trying to better understand how FTE is going to play into your PPP loan forgiveness, this is the video for you. Hi everybody, Matthew with Parkway Business Solutions. Would like to thank you all for taking the time to watch another one of our videos. If you haven't taken the time yet to subscribe, be sure to hit the subscribe button and the little bell, of course, to be notified as we keep releasing more and more content. Now, today's video is specifically focused on FTE, full-time equivalent employees, and more specifically, how it's going to impact your ability for loan forgiveness. So let's jump in. So during this video, what I'm going to do is kind of walk you through how the different calculations are going to work within full-time equivalent, really what it means, and actually even show you a couple calculations of how, depending on the number of hours your different employees have, how that can change. But first, let's get started by talking about how the FTE is going to actually be calculated. The recent documentation where it's showing the loan forgiveness calculator has basically said we have two options to go about this. Option one, I'm calling the SBA suggested calculations. And what this has done is they finally instructed us that the borrower is to use a 40-hour work week as the equivalent of a single full-time employee. So that means people that work 40 hours, that's a 1.0 in your calculation. Now they also define that the maximum any employee can have, it's capped at 1.0. And what that means is if you have an employee that's working 50 hours, 55 hours, no matter what they are, 40 or above, it's still only equal to 1. That's it, just 1. With that in mind, what you would then do is for the remaining amount of employees in this scenario, you would take and add all of their hours together and then divide that by 40 to figure out what the total average number of FTE employees are. Now, when you get that total, you need to round it to the nearest 10th. In just a moment, I'm going to show you some examples between the two, and it'll probably make a little bit more sense. Now, option two in this scenario, they call it the simplified calculation. They actually say that you're able to you can create and submit your own calculation, a simplified method that basically assigns 1.0 for any employee that works 40 hours or more, and a 0.5 for anyone who works fewer hours. So that means 39 hours or less, or really right below 40 hours, they will be a 0.5. So part of the reason I stress this is there's going to be some ways to kind of leverage and play off of this to see what's going to be best for your scenario. These numbers are really, really important because you're going to use them during your chosen period, which used to be also called your look back period, as well as a couple other specific dates, which we'll come back to in just a quick moment. Real quickly, what I'd like to do first is let's talk about a couple examples. If you've got a list of employees, and as you can see here on the screen, what we're looking at is basically just a list of 18 employees. And I want to be able to highlight the differences as if you go from under 20 hours, over 20 hours, 30 hours, that type of scenario. When you take into consideration if anything underneath 40 hours is automatically a 0.5, then your center of gravity, if you will, is right at that 20-hour mark. So if you have more employees that were previously and continue to be working less than 20 hours per week, the simplified version would work to your benefit in most scenarios. However, if you have more employees that are working more hours, 25 or above, in that scenario, actually the SBA calculation may work out in your favor. So to show you this, what we've done is I listed a whole group of employees, and then I just put a bunch of random number of hours down throughout all of this. Some of them over on purpose. And what I did is I created a little formula just basically saying that, hey, if this cell is greater than 40, well, the max you're going to give me is 40 because that would still be equal to that 1.0. Then on this simplified calculation, I put in here, if this cell is greater than 39, then I want a 1. If it's not, I want a 0.5. If we look at how these hours spread out, we'll notice in the simplified version here, we're at a 12.5 FTE, but the SBA calculation version gave us a 14.875, which would be rounded to a 14.9. Now, to demonstrate this a little bit further, I wanted to show, like, we added the total hours here being a total of 625 hours. And then the average hours worked, this is just taking that number divided by the number of employees. Here was at 34.7 hours per employee. This, because the numbers were reduced, made it look like 33. So if we look at the same exact scenarios, and all I'm doing at this point is changing these average hours per week, in this scenario, I very purposely did everything right at 15 hours. When I do this, you're going to notice that the SBA calculation in this scenario actually gives us a lower FTE of 9.25, where the simplified calculation, since it's a 0.5 no matter what, would give us an 11. So the reason these things become important is when you're looking back, you're going to evaluate not only your chosen period, which you did in the past, but you're going to evaluate how that plays against the number of employees you have currently to try to optimize your loan forgiveness. If I go straight to 20 hours, the magic spot, right? We're dead even. Boom, boom, 1-to-1. Over 20 hours, now we're starting to see in this scenario, the SBA calculations have increased our head count, the FTE I should say, in comparison to the simplified version. So I'm hoping by showing this here, it will give you some guidance as to how to evaluate or review the prior periods that you're going to have to compare to. Now we'll go back to our previous document and kind of explain some of that. So when you're looking at the FTE count, there's a couple dates that are extremely, extremely important. The two most important ones to pay attention to right away, your FTE count during the payroll that includes February 15th, 2015. Additionally, the one on June 30th, 2020 as well. You're going to need to know what your FTE count is on both of those days. The other additional two you'll need is going to be your the period between February 15th, 2020 and April 26th, 2020. And then the last one would be your look back period, or again, the chosen period itself, which could be either your February 15th through June 30th of 2019 or January 1st, 2020 through February 29th, 2020, and those are both for if you're a non-seasonal seasonal employer. Seasonal employers have a little bit more leverage that they can choose between those two, or actually a 12-week period as well, which I don't have those dates up right now. I believe it's May through September. It has to be 12 consecutive weeks. Now, the key is whichever method you choose, you have to stick to it. You have to use the same method both places. So that's why it's really important. You actually have to run almost 4 different scenarios, possibly 6 different scenarios to determine what's going to be best for your setup. So the way these calculations have to go through is you start off by choosing, again, whichever method you want, and you're going to calculate what your average FTE is between February 15th and April 26th. And the reason for that is basically they're using the February 15th date as when everything, we'll say, got real. So by figuring out between the 15th and the 26th, that's the period of time they figured that people were laying everybody off until they started to get these PPP funds, and we're supposed to be bringing them back. So most likely, this is your lowest FTE count that you would have. Then you're going to use and compare that against the actual payroll period that included February 15th. So that's how many employees were you paying right when this started, and that becomes a baseline that you have to evaluate against as well. So most likely here at February 15th, your number of employees were higher, drops down between the 15th and the 26th. Once you look at that, you're going to see is the entry on number 2, which is the 15th itself. If it's greater than number 1, which was the period you're going to use the same calculation method that you used before, and calculate the total average FTE between February 15th, April 26th. The last thing you need to do there is you're going to then take those numbers and you need to calculate that again. You're going to calculate the FTE at June 30th. June 30th is important because that is the date that, as of now, there may be change coming in the future, but as of now, you must have your FTE count back up to where it once was or above if you want to obtain full loan forgiveness capability. The very last piece, of course, is you will have to reference this at some point against your chosen period as well, but you kind of get the concept off of this. So what we've done as well, we'll come back and we'll talk about some of the exceptions in just a moment, but I want to actually show you through like a calculator itself of how this stuff is going to work. So these are part of the tables that are on the Schedule A worksheet. But I'm going to actually show you, we ran a basic scenario, and it was kind of a user case, if you will. And I filled in the information and kind of make it a little bit easier for us. But we can see in my scenario, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 employees. And of these 5, you've got Greg, who is salary. You've got Linda, who's working 50 hours a week at $20 an hour. Seth was at 35, Mary was 30, and Jacob was at 20. With this information, we came in, and if I come back over to our data tables, we can look and see that based on the simplified version with those number of hours, well, Greg was full-time salary, so that would be a 1.0. Linda was over 40 hours, she's equal to a 1, and the remaining people would each be a 0.5 each. In this scenario, what I did is I also said that I added me as another employee so we could change the FT count. At the bottom here, we'll get in a little bit closer here, you can see what we were talking about for the calculations. So again, we're going to enter the borrower's total average FTE between February 15th and April 26th. So in our scenario before, we had basically a 3.5 is what we started off with. So if we know on the 15th, I'm going to skip ahead, I'm going to go 3.5 here. And during this period, in our scenario, we laid everybody off, okay? So this is saying that during this period, we dropped down a lot. This is saying 3.5, it's a little bit hidden though. Step 3, it says, if entry in step 2 is greater than step 1, proceed to step 4. Otherwise, the FTE reduction safe harbor is not applicable, and the borrower must complete line 13 of the PPP Schedule A by dividing the 2, which I'll show you in a moment. Now, enter the borrower's total FTE as June 30th. So again, now this is saying we need to get this back up to where we expected it was or what it was previously. So if we did what we were supposed to, we would be back to a 3.5. Now, we hired another person, me, so we actually got to a 4.0. Oops. Because of that 4.0, and I'll squeeze back down to where I was at, in step 5 it says, if the entry in step 4 is greater than or equal to step 2, enter a 1.0 on line 13 of Schedule A. So here it is because we actually increased above. So I'm going to come back up to our Schedule A here. And this whole, basically I turned this PDF into a calculator to make some of this a little bit easier. As we look into here, it's basically saying we would need to enter the information, we would add a 1.0 into line 13. Since we can do that, we can actually click this box, it becomes a 1.0. If it was lower, and this is where this chosen reference period comes into play. If this had been 5 when we first looked back to our chosen reference period, what happens is by taking and dividing 12 by 11, we see we've actually had a reduction of 20%, or so the remaining would be 0.8. This comes into play when we take a look at the top calculation up here. And I know this part can be very confusing, of course. But when we come back in, you'll see that our FTE reduction quotient, because that 0.8 here, took and at the total amount of payroll stuff that we had, 47, multiplies it by 0.8 and reduces it down. So this is how it implements, reduces the potential loan forgiveness. I'm going to go back down again. We'll put that back to a 1.0. And it's because we know it's a 1.0. I'll click right there and come back up. Now, one thing I found when I'm doing these calculators on a PDF is they don't always change the calculations. So I just put this little checkbox because it gives a way to fix it real quickly. So now we had this 47 times 1.0 means no change. What this does is the loan forgiveness becomes the least amount of everything that's on here. In this scenario, our actual loan amount was 46,818. So in this scenario, using the amount we did for mortgage, for rent, for utilities, which is less than 25% of the total amount, we actually will have accomplished full 100% loan forgiveness in this scenario. So I hope by going through these details, this basically helps kind of show you the importance of how the FTE works and how the calculations are done. There is one more part of this, of course, as well, and it has to do with the exceptions, the reduction exclusions is what I should call it. So a reduction exclusion has to do with at this time in California especially, if you're making less than $25 an hour, it's very likely you would be making more money on unemployment than going back to work. Now this creates conflict for business owners because if you need to get the people back to work so you can have your FTE count to get your loan forgiveness, but they don't want to come back because they're making more money on unemployment, what do? They introduced the safe harbor FTE reduction exceptions. And basically what it's saying is if the borrower makes in good faith, in writing, very important, in writing, an offer to rehire the employee during the covered period or the alternative payroll covered period, which was rejected by the employee, or if during that period of time they were fired with cause or voluntarily resigned, the reduction, you actually will be exempt from the reduction for that specific employee. And where that comes into play is at the very bottom of these different boxes here, there's a place that you would add in, and you need to keep track of all of these. You have to have written record of it so you don't lose it. You'd end up having a reduction here. So 1. You'll notice that this box becomes 3, drops it down, but it becomes an exemption so you don't have to have as much. It changes the whole formula to it. So one of the things I also wanted to share through all this was one of the things that we did here at Parkway is we wrote this up, and this was actually written up prior to the recent guidance we had for the worksheet itself. And it's a notice to employees. The goal from this is we can imagine that a lot of employers are being forced to have this uncomfortable conversation with their employees is, hey, it's time to get back to work. We've got the money coming in and we got to get you working so we can spend this money, keep you happy, keep you employed, so forth. So by creating this template letter, we gave it to all of our clients. They can go through, and it basically talks about, how interesting it's been, coronavirus, so forth, blah, blah, blah. Talks about applying for the PPP assistance so people understand what it is that you're doing. And then in our place, what we've done is we've elected, this is not necessary, but we've elected to actually process payrolls. We're doing a weekly payroll for each of our clients where the first day of the payroll started on the date that was funded. And we did start it this way before the loan guidance was provided, trying to make sure we mitigated any chance of having to accrue hours on the outsides. But there are some other ways you can actually handle it with the new guidance. With this in mind, because we were changing pay periods, we needed to notify the employees that their pay dates would be changing as well. This gave us an opportunity to talk about the impacts of unemployment as well. And we basically put in here, as a part of the CARES Act, employees who were unable to work due to COVID were eligible to receive federally funded unemployment until the business was able to open again. Fortunately, most employees have been able to continue work over the past couple of weeks, and thanks to the PPP funds, we are now ready to schedule work hours for everyone to start, and you put your starting date in. Another condition for the loan to be forgiven is focused on the number of employees a business brings back to work before June 30th, 2020. The intention of this new bill is to get people back to work and out of the unemployment system. Recently, new guidance was handed down by the Treasury Department, which requires employers to inform the SBA of any employees who elect to remain on unemployment by declining to return to work. It's important to note that any unemployment funds collected after starting date may be required to be repaid by the employee who declined to return to work. We wish to thank you for hanging in with us during these very difficult times, blah, blah, blah. So the intention is to basically soft touch, make sure the employees know, make them aware of what's going on so they can understand how it will impact not only the business, but themselves. So the goal is, by doing this, you'll be able to convince people to come back. As it stands currently, the unemployment for the extra, we're talking about the extra $600 of PUA, it ends as of July 31st as of now. So most employees would be wise not to be trying to pull that card for just a short amount of time. So I hope going through this portion of the FTE was very helpful. I hope you could see that by playing with the number of hours, you can evaluate which is the best way for you to go at looking at your prior chosen period versus the recent time to ensure you have the most appropriate FTE count. Keep in mind, one of the tips I keep trying to suggest to people is, if you find yourself at a lower FTE count with extra wages that you need to spend, you might be able to find somebody that if you have a project you need to get going, perhaps you could hire somebody on as a W-2 employee. So maybe you need to get your website done or some marketing, something where it would normally be like a 1099 person. If you can hire them on as a W-2 employee and provide them hours, it's a way to utilize some of the funds legally while getting something done because you're bringing more employees back to pay. So hope everybody has a wonderful week. If you've got questions, be sure, leave them in the comments below. I'll do my best to get back to you as quick as possible. And as always, here's wishing everybody a very successful week.